Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are collectively known as the BRICS countries. A British-born economist coined the acronym, which is now widely used when talking about the new emerging economic powers. In 2008, a global economic crisis swept the world, reminding people of the Great Depression of the 1930s. During the recent economic woes, the emerging economies of the BRICS nations have redirected the course of the global economy. The stories of these 5 countries are the stories of a new reality that's changing the old economic order. In 1487, the King of Portugal ordered Bartholomew Diaz to find a sea route to India. A sudden storm pushed his fleet to an unnamed headland. Bartholomew Diaz escaped with his life. Afterward, he named the headland Cape of Storms, which is today known as Cape of Good Hope. South Africa became known to the world thanks to the Cape of Good Hope. Two lighthouses, one old and one new, stand on the Cape of Good Hope. They serve 2 entirely different purposes. The old one tells about history, while the new one points in the direction of the future. Markers at the base of the old lighthouse show the distance from this point to capital cities around the world. Beijing is 12,933 kilometers away. There is not only a great distance between China and South Africa, but there is also an awareness gap for most Chinese about South Africa. The first beam of sunlight on the Cape of Good Hope ushers in another day in South Africa. In 1652, a joint Dutch and East Indian Company fleet landed at the Cape of Good Hope. They set up a supply depot for ships that stopped at the Cape of Good Hope on their way to India and East Asia. The crew of these Dutch ships became the first batch of immigrants to South Africa. They were joined later by German and French immigrants. Together, they were to become known as Afrikaners. 143 years later, the British took over Cape Town and replaced the Afrikaners as the ruler of this stretch of land. Eventually, the Afrikaners began to move into the hinterland away from the coast in order to escape the rule of Britain. They established their capital in Pretoria. Pretoria is the administrative capital of South Africa. The degree of Europeanization of the urban architecture creates the feeling of being in a time warp. It was the intention of the city designers and also the desire of the Afrikaner immigrants. The Voortrekker Monument is located in the southern suburbs.
The whole idea behind it was mooted first by the old president of the Transvaal Republic, President Paul Kruger, who mooted the idea that there should be a monument for the Voortrekker people.
The migration of the Afrikaners was eventful. The local Zulu people fought against their attempts to occupy the land. On December 16th in 1838, Afrikaners launched a decisive battle against 15,000 Zulu warriors at the bend of the Nkangmu River. The battle was so brutal, it was to be called Battle of the Bloody River. At 12 o'clock on every December 16th, a beam of sunlight streaks through an opening in the dome of the memorial to light up the words inscribed on marble inside. The inscription reads, "Do everything for you, South Africa."
In the old days it was a contribution to the Voortrekkers or white people. Today it's a very inclusive monument because it recalls the history of all South Africans.
Along their migration route, the Afrikaners founded two republics, Transvaal State and Orange Free State. After the Anglo-Boer War in the early 20th century, the pair became a colony of Great Britain. This colony, the British Open Cape Colony and Natal Colony, formed the prototype of the modern political structure of South Africa. A new phase of the British colonial period began. Before the regime model was established, the economic structure of South Africa had undergone enormous changes. A statue of George Harrison, a gold panner, stands by Highway 24 from Tambo Airport to downtown Johannesburg. One day in March of 1886, Harrison was strolling on a farm north of Johannesburg. He was feeling depressed because he had failed to find any gold. He then tripped over an exposed rock. To vent his frustration, he gave the rock a kick. To his surprise, he discovered it was a chunk of gold. A far more intense gold rush appeared in South Africa. At the same time, a frenzy of diamond exploration rose in the country. To many people, Kimberley is the brand name of diamonds. It is also the name of a city along the Orange River in North Cape Province in South Africa. The first diamond mine and the first diamond company in South Africa were located here. The Mine Museum and a huge open pit for diamond mining remind people of the glorious days of those years. The first diamond was found in South Africa on the Kimberley River in 1866.
Well, that was obviously discovered by the son of really a farmer on the Vaal River, nothing to do with De Beers. But luckily he had this bright pebble which he thought was a nice toy to play with, but somebody was passing who thought it might be more than just a pebble to play with and took it to Cape Town where it was confirmed as a diamond. And
this is the first diamond found in South Africa. It weighs 25.25 carats and is named Eureka. But it is not this diamond that set off the frenzy of exploration in South Africa. It was a diamond named Star of South Africa, found in 1868. This find became an important turning point of the economy and even the history of South Africa. This frenzy brought South Africa, traditionally an agricultural country, onto the road of industrialization.
Well, I think if it wasn't for the mining sector in South Africa, we would not have seen the industrialization of South Africa. For example, diamonds brought about Kimberley. Kimberley was one of the first cities in the world, in fact the first city in the world with streetlights. Nobody before Kimberley had streetlights.
Along with the discovery of gold and diamonds in South Africa, there was the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1899. British colonists waged the first war in 1880 to grab territories. This time they wanted control of the gold and diamond mines. Cecil Rhodes, founder of De Beers, was involved in both the wars. Toward the end of the 19th century, British colonists went all out to expand their domination of the globe. The Union Jack was seen flying above nearly 1/3 of the world, from the distant cold northern coast of Canada to the hot Indian subcontinent, from the vast outback of Australia to tiny Atlantic Ocean islands. Cecil Rhodes is a symbol of the expansionist policy of the British Empire. He was the founder of De Beers, but he also served as the British Prime Minister of the Cape Colony in South Africa. American novelist Mark Twain described Rhodes this way: "When he stood on the Cape of Good Hope Peninsula, his shadow fell on Zambia." Rhodes sought to turn the vast territory of Africa, from the Cape of Good Hope to Cairo, into colonies of Great Britain. For this he launched the First Anglo-Boer War and provoked the Second War. The Second Anglo-Boer War had a far-reaching effect on the political pattern in South Africa. In 1910, 4 political entities in South Africa, the Republic of Cape, the Republic of Natal, the Republic of Transvaal, and the Republic of Orange, merged into the Republic of the British Union of South Africa. The newly formed Union of South Africa established 3 capital cities. Pretoria, the capital of Transvaal Province, serves as the administrative capital. Cape Town, capital of Cape Province, serves as the legislative capital. Bloemfontein, capital of Orange Free State, serves as the judicial capital. The capital of Natal Province and the capital of Durban obtained the dominating right for South Africa's imports and exports. The 3 capitals of South Africa have kept their status until today. It was in this setting that the roots developed for the most notorious apartheid system in the history of mankind. This building houses the Apartheid Museum in South Africa. The exhibits show how much pain every black African suffered under the rule of racial discrimination from the 1940s to the early 1990s. Daniel Malan is the most controversial white politician in the history of South Africa. In 1948, the National Party of South Africa won the general election. Daniel Malan became the country's prime minister. He began to implement harsh policies of apartheid, opening the darkest page in the history of black South Africans. According to the apartheid law enacted in 1951, citizens of South Africa were divided into the white people, colored people, and Africans. They were assigned to live in separate communities. Whites, accounting for less than 17% of the total population, owned more than 87% of the fertile land. The Pass Law, enacted in 1952, stipulated that non-whites must carry 60 kinds of documents when they went out. Without these documents, they would be imprisoned or fined. Later, the Bantu Autonomous Law further divided South Africans into 8 different tribal self-government units, namely Bantustan, or Homeland of Blacks. The Apartheid Museum is a prime destination for tourists from all over the world when they visit South Africa. People can get a close feeling for this period in the history of South Africa.
That was that while there were still people who were actively involved in the struggle, alive to tell their stories.
I'm Leon's mother. What's name again? Lang. I'm curious.
The film Skin Color was adapted from a true story. Sandra Ryan, the prototype of the heroine, lived in a black ghetto in the suburbs of Johannesburg. She had led a life much the same as that of most black housewives in South Africa. Her personal experience, as depicted in the film, tells the shocking tragedy of apartheid. Sandra Ryan was born in 1955. Her parents were white. By birth, she should have been a white girl, but Ryan was born with dark skin and curly hair. She looked much like a black girl. In the apartheid era, the law judged one's race according to his or her appearance. For this, Ryan was discriminated against by the whites and at the same time rejected by the blacks.
The kids started to tease me and say that I'm not white. The school and the government decided to expel me from school. That was in 1966. I was 11 years old.
Ryan's skin color problem was later diagnosed as an atavism, the result of a gene mutation. The result did not change the fate of Ryan. In accordance with the law at that time, Ryan was not allowed to swim at the beach within the white area, nor could she take a public bus, eat in a restaurant, go to the cinema, or go to church with her parents. She was even not allowed to be buried in her family's cemetery after her death. Ryan's father, Abraham, fought persistently for his daughter to get a white identity. His persistent efforts forced the government to amend the law concerning racial discrimination in 1967. According to the revised law, one's identity was no more judged by his or her appearance, but by the bloodline. Ryan regained her white identity, but she still could not shake off the trouble caused by her skin color. White society refused to accept her. She eventually married a black. Ryan's decision infuriated her father, Abraham. He drove his daughter out of his house. At that time, Ryan was 16 years old. She did not see her father until he died of throat cancer. In 2000, Ryan met her mother. It was 30 years after she left her parents' house. This photo was taken by a reporter from the Sunday Times.
I left her in 1971. She was still young. But when I found her in 2000, she was very ill.
This was the last reunion between Ryan and her mother. Her mother died 2 years later. Her brother did not tell her the news because he did not want his black-skinned sister to be present at his mother's funeral. In the 3 decades of separation, her brother never got in touch with her. Ryan says it's an everlasting pain in her heart. As time passed, the story of Sandra Ryan and apartheid have become vague in people's memories. Occasionally, when the apartheid era is mentioned, the hatred of it has been replaced by the sympathy toward Ryan. Soweto town is 24 kilometers southwest of Johannesburg. It's where Ryan lives. About 1.5 million black people are here. The local residents lead a life different from that of Sandra Ryan. Theirs is brutal and bloody. This photo once shocked the world. It shows a scene of great tragedy in the apartheid system. On June 16, 1976, thousands of primary and middle school students in Soweto launched demonstrations to protest the introduction of a law that forced schools to use Afrikaans as the language for teaching lessons. Police opened fire without any warning. More than 200 students were killed. This incident was known as the Soweto Massacre. 12-year-old Hector Peterson was the youngest of the students who died. Paula Majla was a lucky survivor of the massacre. More than 30 years have passed, but he still feels the fear of that day.
We came out, and the next thing, there were a lot of police outside, and we were told that we're not going to write any exams anymore because there was a big strike within the country. And within that 30 minutes, the police started to shoot.
People built this museum in Soweto in memory of that tragedy and those who died. It is named after Hector Peterson, one of the students who was killed. The museum preserves the names of those murdered students. The deprivation of the political rights of black people was not the only consequence of the apartheid system. Black people also suffered economic losses. The manufacturing industry developed very fast thanks to the economic model of resource development in the country as the mainstay. In 1932, the gross national product of South Africa was only 460 million rand. The figure reached 15 billion in 1972 and further to 59.2 billion rand in 1980. The fast growth was called an economic miracle.
We've had two periods of very good growth in South Africa. The one was from roughly 1960 to 1980, but there was a bit of a slowdown in the mid-70s.
Under the apartheid system, South Africa's economic miracle brought only limited benefit to blacks who accounted for most of the population. In 1982, for an example, the per capita monthly income of white employees was 1,073 rand, while that of black employees was only 278 rand. The ratio was 3.9 to 1. In 1987, the ratio was reduced to 3.3 to 1. The increase rate of monthly pay of blacks was 113.31% against the 82.57% increase of the whites. However, the absolute income gap between blacks and whites was widened from 795 rand in 1982 to 1,366 rand in 1987. In the apartheid era, the income gap between whites and blacks, regardless of the relative value or absolute value, had kept expanding. Later, under pressure from the struggle of blacks and international anti-apartheid groups, the relative income gap began to shrink, but the absolute gap was still expanding. The blacks were deprived of both political and economic rights.
Prior to 1994, what you had was an apartheid government. And an apartheid government was effectively a racialized government. It was not simply a government of white people. It also simply represented white people. Black people were not citizens of the society. They were, if you like, surplus labor.
People are convinced that if not for Mandela and the effort for political self-redemption, the economic growth in South Africa would be like the Stopelia pochella flower, which looks pretty but is toxic. About 30 kilometers south of Umtata in Eastern Cape is a small town named Noom. At dusk, local residents come back from work for supper. Manla, Mandela, and villagers begin to enjoy a hearty barbecue dinner. Manla Mandela is the tribal chief of the Mvezo Kosha people. He inherited this position from his grandfather, Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa. In January of 2011, Nelson Mandela returned to his hometown from Johannesburg. He would live in the house on the opposite side to enjoy his old age. Nelson Mandela spent his childhood in Noom. He was born in Mvezo village several dozen kilometers away.
Mvezo is where my grandfather was born, but also is where the Mandela's roots are located. We come from these humble beginnings, and the story of the Mandelas can never be told without mention of Mvezo.
Nelson Mandela was born on July 18th of 1918. He was the only son of Henry Mandela, chieftain of the local Tembu tribe. He might have inherited his father's position, but he said, "I will never be willing to rule over an oppressed tribe as its chieftain." He declared he would join the cause of national liberation as a soldier. ANC stands for African National Congress. In 1944, Mandela became an ANC member. Liberation from white rule through non-violent means was ANC's founding principle. It has been a principle Mandela has advocated. In 1960, South African authorities declared ANC an illegal organization. In 1962, Mandela was charged with sedition and illegally crossing a border and sentenced to 5 years in prison. 2 years later, at this court in Pretoria, Mandela was charged with attempting to overthrow the government by violence and given a life sentence. He spent 27 years in prison. At sunset, Robben Island looks like a giant butterfly with its wings spread on the sea. In the 1960s, there was a secret prison for political offenders on this small island. The prison admitted the 466th inmate in June of 1964. The newcomer was given the number 46664. He was Nelson Mandela, who was locked in a cell of 4.5 square meters. Today, it takes only 20 minutes by boat from the dock in Cape Town to reach Robben Island. But it took Mandela 27 years from Robben Island to freedom. During the 27 years in prison, Mandela thought of only one thing: how to find the future for South Africa under the apartheid system. The full implementation of the apartheid system in South Africa provoked strong condemnation from the international community. On March 21st, the United Nations General Assembly declared that day as International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination and called on all member states to break off diplomatic relations with South Africa and stop their investments, trade, and sale of weapons to South Africa. The country was completely isolated politically and economically. The withdrawal of foreign capital brought South Africa's economic miracle to a halt. By the end of the 1980s, the domestic economy of this country had reached the brink of collapse. A storm was in the making. Major changes had become inevitable due to the heavy pressure brought forth by public opinion at home and abroad, as well as the drive of white reformers.
I wish to put it plainly that the government has taken a firm decision to release Mr. Mandela unconditionally.
On February 11th, 71-year-old Nelson Mandela walked out of the Victor Verster prison. Mandela enjoyed the afternoon sunshine for the first time as a free man in 27 years. Two days later, 100,000 supporters gathered in the National Stadium of South Africa to greet Mandela. Speaking firmly and with confidence, he told them that to negotiate the elimination of the apartheid system, people must face up to the overriding requirement. What was the requirement, and how to face up to it? On December 10, 1993, the annual Nobel Peace Prize award ceremony was held in Oslo, Norway. This time, the Peace Prize was awarded to two people. One was Nelson Mandela. The other was South African President Frederick William de Klerk. 12 days later, the white-controlled South African Parliament adopted the interim constitution with 237 votes in favor and 45 votes against. For the first time, blacks in South Africa were given a status equal to that of whites.
On the 2nd of February 1990, I made announcements which were unexpected. Not only the release of Mr. Mandela I announced, but also the legitimization of the ANC and all other organizations which were banned, inviting them to come and sit across me from the table and to negotiate a new constitution.
F.W. de Klerk, the last president of the white regime of South Africa, is one of the most important players in the end of the apartheid system in South Africa. He overcame many obstacles within his party and worked with Mandela to bring South Africa from the brink of a civil war and make racial reconciliation possible. People believe that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to de Klerk out of respect for history.
They were chained together. They couldn't do without each other. Both of them were needed to bring about the change. The two leading figures were Mr. de Klerk and Mr. Mandela, and both of them deserve very, very great credit for what they had done.
We are normal. We are human beings. We can walk.
This scene took place in July of 2000 at the 13th World Conference on AIDS in Durban, South Africa. The boy speaking is Nkosi Johnson. His white foster mother, Kyle Johnson, sits in the audience.
I was over the moon because he fought very hard for acceptance of HIV-positive people, and he fought very hard for people to take responsibility.
Kyle Johnson is the dean of Nkosi Paradise Orphanage in Johannesburg. Some of the 100-plus orphans suffer from AIDS. The orphanage's name is that of Kyle's adopted son, Nkosi Johnson. He was born in 1989 with HIV. His mother was an AIDS patient and could not take care of her baby. Kyle Johnson adopted him when he was 2 years old. The apartheid system had not died out. The antagonism between blacks and whites was still strong. Not all the whites could understand why Kyle Johnson adopted Nkosi.
I like to think that it's not the color of the person, but it's the person. So I don't care if I'm only looking after black children.
Under her care, Nkosi started a long struggle against AIDS. He became the longest surviving AIDS patient, but the miracle did not last forever. In early 2000, Nkosi's condition began to deteriorate.
I actually feel this is my last chance to live. But actually, no, it's not. This is my last day, my last year.
On June 1st of 2001, as youngsters around the world were celebrating Children's Day, 12-year-old Nkosi died in his sleep. He has left behind a moving story about South Africa. From the love Kyle Johnson gave to a black boy, blacks knew they were not isolated in the struggle against apartheid. She said at Nkosi's funeral, "He taught me to give love and be tolerant unconditionally. I hope that all South Africans will do this." In April 1994, 4 years after his release from prison, Mandela was elected President of South Africa in the ANC's first non-racial election. In the following year, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was set up to investigate the crimes committed under apartheid. Compensation was given to the victims, and the offenders were requested to make confessions in order to seek forgiveness. The effort was made for racial reconciliation. Forgiveness and reconciliation were what Mandela had pondered during the 27 years of his prison life. His idea is critical for people to understand why South Africa is called Rainbow Country. The new Constitution of South Africa was formulated in 2 years. It was adopted on May 8, 1996. The new Constitution completely abolished the apartheid system. South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu compared the new Constitution to a rainbow. The 3 colors of black, yellow, and green on the ANC flag, and the 3 colors of red, white, and blue on the flag of the white South African regime were put together in the new national flag of South Africa. The concept of Rainbow Country was formally confirmed.
This is the very fact that we refer to ourselves as a rainbow nation. It means we have accepted that we are divided, we are different nationalities, but we are united in our diversity. Our diversity brings strength, not a weakness.
The abolition of the apartheid system freed blacks from the political bonds. However, the new South Africa was troubled by a sluggish economy, chaotic social order, ethnic conflicts, disunity among its people, and an impending civil war. Mandela and the new South Africa were confronted with the problem of which direction to take.
If we don't forgive them, then that feeling of bitterness and revenge will be there. And we are saying, let us forget the past. Let's concern ourselves with the present and the future. But to say the atrocities of the past will never be allowed to happen again.
Mandela was destined to play the role of the Redeemer by his baptism of several decades of struggle against racism. No one else was as clear as he that in order to save South Africa, the soul of South Africans, including the whites, must be saved first. Mandela did not choose violence, rather football. In 2009, the feature film Invictus was shown all over the world. It tells the story about Mandela and the South African Rugby World Cup, held in 1995. Before the game was held, the performance of South Africa's rugby team, the Springboks, was very poor. It became a target of ridicule. But Mandela decided to support this team, which was made up entirely of whites. The team won the championship of this World Cup. Mandela personally presented the trophy to the team captain. This session of the Rugby World Cup is considered a key to opening the white inner world. The new South Africa once again felt the power of reconciliation. This desolate valley is located between Johannesburg and Pretoria. If you do not stop to read the inscription, you will not notice this place. When you read the words, you cannot help but linger to see what is in it. The words are cradle of humankind. The fossils unearthed in this place tell the evolution of humankind from 3.5 million years ago to the present time. Anthropologists believe our ancestors first appeared here and then moved to other parts of the world. 150 years ago, when Darwin stated in his Origin of Species that the birthplace of humanity was in Africa, he meant South Africa. Darwin did not live long enough to convince anthropologists to accept his point of view because people had long been accustomed to looking at the African continent through colonialist eyes. South Africa contains the origin of humans, the shadow of a colonial history, the shame of apartheid, and the force for reconciliation. Social layers are interwoven in this country. It needs time to find a way out of the confusion. The new South Africa has only just shaken off the bonds of apartheid rule and still has many decisions to make for its future.
一闪微现，在1000年出海，任那时的人愿，用一朵花开的时间，以海为圈，以天地为庭。诗篇，用千家人的光线，是